Put aside for the moment what's going on with President Trump and President Xi. If you, in fact, were President of the United States, which you said you want to be, how would you handle China?
Well, we have legitimate grievances with China, most specifically how they have really stolen intellectual property for decades, and that continues to be their economic strategy. So China is a very, very significant economic threat to us. They haven't played by the rules, and we have to have serious conversations. The way I would deal with it is to try to build a global alliance, because a lot of countries share these exact same concerns, build a global alliance to work together to put pressure on China to open up their markets in a way that's fair. I wouldn't be doing what the current president's doing.
Is that what the voters want? I mean, you have not only your own district running in, but you're also traveling across the country, about to go back to Iowa yet again. Are you hearing that from voters, that they want a multilateral approach, or do they agree with the president that multilateral just hasn't worked?
Well, I'm about to do my 14th trip to Iowa, and I can tell you farmers in Iowa don't like the approach the current president is taking, right? Engaging in trade wars that don't seem to have any particular strategy associated with them. I think a multilateral approach works because we have to think about the economy as a global economic community, which is what it is. I'm not saying we shouldn't be tough on China. I'm not saying we shouldn't be pushing them hard to lower tariffs and trade barriers. I'm not saying we shouldn't be using all the economic leverage we have. But if we actually want to make a big difference against the issue that is most concerning with China, which is their theft of intellectual property, and make sure they're not allowed to do for the next 20 years what they've done for the last 20 years, then we have to build a global consensus, and we have to get the U.S. private sector working in unison so that we present a unified front to China to actually force them to open up the markets the way they need to.
Many people who come on this show say the exact same thing, a global approach, a multilateral approach. But then why hasn't this been tried in the past, and what's different now?
Well, because we haven't had a successful multilateral approach, right? Because China's been able to pick off our companies individually, right? So they cut one-off deals one at a time with each individual U.S. corporation. And the global community hasn't been as unified. I mean, look at what's happened to China over the last several decades is they've made smart investments, they've worked really hard, but they also haven't played by the rules. And we just can't let that happen. The next wave of technological innovation, automation, artificial intelligence, we cannot let them to continue to behave the way they are. And I think we have an opportunity if we actually can focus not only all U.S. corporations and the global community on coming together around this issue.
So to your point, are you indicating that maybe the WTO hasn't played a fair role in just being the arbiter of all of these trade deals?
No, I mean, I do think that we have. I mean, I support the WTO. I do think they need to be more assertive, and I do think we need to be exercising more influence through them to get what is in the best interest of the American citizens and U.S. competitiveness. So I support the framework of the organization and the institution, but I do think we need to be putting more pressure on China through the WTO and through other means.
So we've been talking about trade, but I wonder whether that's really the number one issue on most voters' minds as we go into November. I think a lot of people, what we hear, at least on this program, is it's pocketbook issues.
Absolutely.
How are they doing personally in their lives? How do you as a Democrat, whether in your home district or across the country, how do you go up against a president and a party that has given substantial tax cuts, is deregulating? We have substantial growth, 4.1% in the most recent numbers in GDP growth. You've got full employment or darn close to it. How can you say, oh, no, we'll do better?
Listen, those metrics are positive, and I'm very happy about those. But still, we have a situation in this country right now where 50% of the American people could not afford a $400 surprise expense, meaning if something happens to their health care or to their house or to their car, they don't have the savings or the credit card capacity to handle that. That's half the American population. So even though those traditional metrics of economic performance seem good, the pocketbook issues, as you talked about, as it relates to the average American, are not that good, right? So I think the Democratic Party, we ought to focus on those issues, and we need a plan, which I believe I have, as to how to make sure the job market is not only strong, but spread out pretty evenly around this country, that we do things to raise wages, deal with health care, deal with education, deal with opportunities for people's kids. That's what most voters are focused on.
In a few days, you're headed to Iowa, and of course, this will be you've made a dozen trips there in the last few weeks. As a prospective Democratic presidential candidate, or as a candidate, we are not seeing those other prospective candidates making their trip to Iowa. Why do you think that is, and where will you be focusing your efforts going to 2020?
So what I'm talking to Iowans about is number one, I'm being honest about my intention and ambitions to be the president, which is why I tell people why I'm going there. But listen, I think the American people understand that the world's changed really rapidly. Globalization, which we just talked about, technological innovation, these things are changing everything in our society. They're changing the future of work. They're changing our demographics, our security risks, everything. And we haven't done the basic things we've needed to do as a society to update kind of the basic institutions, whether they be healthcare, education, to help our citizens deal with this change, which is why so many people have been left behind. So what I'm telling Iowans is I want to be the leader that can actually bring this country together, form a coalition of Democrats, independents, Republicans who don't support the president, and actually get this group together so we can actually make some progress on some of these most basic issues that we've been fighting about because of partisan politics for decades and we haven't made any progress on. I think that's what voters are looking for. They want to turn the page on this decade of incredible kind of partisan politics where nothing gets done and politicians put their political party ahead of their country. And they want leaders actually to engage in a form of principled compromise where they actually work together and get real things done to help them, the voters, because that's our job.